Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Todd Klindt's SharePoint podcast number 243, recorded live on a beautiful Monday, April 13th, 2015. I am your host and recent Green Jacket winner, Todd Klindt. Before we get started, and we've got a great show tonight, we've got a guest tonight. It's going to be very exciting. But before we get too far down the road, I do have to give a shout out to my friends, my homies at Rackspace. So not only did they provide me with that great slide and this PowerPoint template that I use back here, they send me paychecks every week, which is, honest to goodness, incredibly generous of them, incredibly generous. But you can find out all the great things they've got going on at sharepoint.rackspace.com. That's all about our SharePoint offering. And if you do more than SharePoint, we've got SQL, we've got Hyper-V, we've got all that crazy stuff. But start out at sharepoint.rackspace.com. Get in there, see what's out there, ask some questions. We got videos out there, white papers. If you get lonely, and who doesn't get lonely, we get the little chat window there. You can talk to those folks. They'd love to hear what you got going on. Just, if you want to know what kind of pizza to order, if that dress makes your butt look big, these folks, they'll answer it. So find all that at sharepoint.rackspace.com. For production notes, not a lot to talk about. Last week's went pretty well. Got it out pretty soon, all that kind of stuff. The sound was a little weird. Hopefully this week's sound will not be weird. That reminds me, I'm going to check. So sound hopefully will be better. I will make sure that I'm using the good mic right here as opposed to my webcam mic or anything like that. That was all good. So a couple things to remind everybody about. I've got the one pass to the AvePoint Red Party for at Ignite. So the way that you can be eligible to win that is subscribe to my podcast on iTunes and then leave a review, and you got to leave a comment. You got to leave a comment so your name shows up, so I know who you are. So leave a comment. You can talk about how dreamy I am, my movie star good looks, the rich baritone of my voice. Any of these are acceptable things to talk about. But leave that so I can see who you are. Or you can also subscribe to this podcast on YouTube at youtube.com/ToddKlintNetcast. Subscribe to the Netcast and then leave a note after this comment on this video so I know who you are. And then sometime next week, maybe, I got some notes about next week, I'll draw a winner, and that person will get a ticket to the AvePoint Red Party at Ignite. And that one is, I think, Monday night, I forget. Tuesday night something. But a great party. Those guys are physically incapable of throwing a bad party. They've never done it. They have tried, and it just they can't do it. They always throw great parties, and it's ridiculous over-the-top parties. These are the same folks. AvePoint are the folks that give away Ducati motorcycles at TechEd and all that. So you know it's going to be a great party. I would tell you about some of the great things that have gone on at these red parties, but you're sworn to secrecy. It's those kind of parties. So go out there. You can also go to avepoint.com, and they've got a contest going, so you can find out a way there to win one also. But you can win one by subscribing to my podcast on iTunes or on YouTube. Another production note, I've talked about moving the time that this podcast is on. We have been at the 8:30 Monday night time slot for many, many years now, probably 5 years. And it's always been pretty good, but we've had some folks talk about how they'd like it a little earlier. Now that I'm bringing guests in, I've got some European guests that I'd like to bring in, and it's about 2 o'clock in the morning for them, 2:30. Honestly, this show isn't worth staying up till 8:34. Let alone 2:30. So I've been thinking about changing the time, moving it back a little bit. So let me know what you think. If you're for or against that, and it would be for the live show. We got 30-some people in the chat room here. This could be you if the time is right. So hit me up on Twitter at Todd Klindt, or send me an email, todd.klint@rackspace.com. Let me know what you think. If you like the time, 8:30 Central works for you, by all means. But that would potentially also keep me from competing against Monday Night Football and Dancing with the Stars. And I think Single Ladies is on right now, too. I forget exactly. But if you've got an idea about the time, I've got a couple of ideas about when I might move it, but I want to hear what you've got to think, what you're thinking. So let me know. And on that note, I have some sad news about next week. So as many of you know, I'm going to be speaking at the SharePoint Evolution Conference next week, and that will be in London, the place where it's 2:30 in the morning right now. So I will not be doing my podcast next week. That's not the bad news. It's bad news. But the worst news is that Shane will be doing my podcast next week. Now, You guys have been very gracious with Shane. He's not very smart. I've done the best that I can with him. You guys have been very gracious to him, and I appreciate that. Shane will be taking the helm next week. I have no idea what he's going to be talking about. Shiny things, his favorite color, who knows. But I'll be in London. It just won't be possible for me to do the show. So next week I will not be here. The week after that, I will be back for 2:45. That's the week before Ignite, and then I don't know what for sure is going to happen the week of Ignite, because Monday night I'm going to be here. It's going to be Central Time Zone, but I'm going to be partying. I'm going to be having the time of my life somewhere in Chicago, so we'll have to see what we can do about that. But I apologize in advance for Shane next week. I'm so sorry. You guys don't deserve it. You're too good of people for this, but like I've said before, he is ever so slightly better than dead air, just a little bit better than dead air, not a lot, just a little bit. So that's it. All right, so now we've got a guest in the house tonight, following in some big footprints. We've had Shane in here. He doesn't really count, but we've had Mark Manassi here last month, and he did a great job. Tonight, I want to introduce you all to Jeff Hicks. You probably already know him, PowerShell MVP, all-around smart guy. And Jeff, apparently he's doing community service for something, I don't know, but he has agreed to come on the podcast tonight. And so, Jeff, come on in, introduce yourself, tell the viewers a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Todd. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I have nothing else to do on Monday night, so because Top Gear is all messed up now, so I might as well do this.
I do like the reason that you're on the podcast. Not, I'm a big fan of the show, or I had nothing better to do. I was literally just going to sit in the corner and stare at the wall until this came up,
Yeah, no. Thanks for having me. Yeah. Now a lot of people know me. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was gonna lament a little bit about Top Gear. For those of you that don't follow Top Gear, tremendous show from the BBC, quite possibly the funniest show in the history of shows, and they had some personnel problems, and now it is no more. So that's
probably
very sad.
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, but we're not here to talk about Top Gear. We're here to talk about whatever was on your mind. Probably something related to PowerShell if I'm here.
Absolutely. So those of you that watch the show know that I'm a huge fan of PowerShell. Got a big old crush. Used to do the PowerShell tip of the week until I ran out of things that I knew about PowerShell. So there's like 3 of them is what I'm saying. It was like a solid 3 weeks of PowerShell tips, and then I was all, have you heard about get command? Very short-lived. But I did, Jeff and I, again, like Mark, we travel in the same circles, speak at the same conferences, and we, our paths have crossed. We've chatted about PowerShell. So I wanted to get him on and just kind of get some actual, honest-to-goodness PowerShell talent in here to talk about some stuff. And kind of the thing that got me really excited about it was the week of blog posts you guys put out last week. So tell everybody about those blog posts.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, thought I would try kind of a social media experiment, and so I contacted some other PowerShell people in the community, like Mike Robbins, who's in the chat room, and June Blender, who used to be on the PowerShell product team writing documentation. She's now I think a technology evangelist for Sapien, and some other PowerShell MVPs. Anyway, so we decided, why don't we kind of write a bunch of blog articles on a central topic and schedule them, one a day, and kind of build up some interest in PowerShell, maybe drive some traffic to our sites, build up maybe Twitter followers. So as much a social media experiment as it was a as it was a PowerShell experiment. So we came up with this idea to write about advanced PowerShell functions. We each picked a topic. Actually, I think Adam Bertram came up with the list and assigned things to us, and we said, okay, yep, you're going to go this day, you're going to go this day, and then we just wrote our topics, scheduled them once a week, used a hashtag to schedule them all out, and then when we're all done, I put together a PDF and some other ebook formats of all the posts, which are also available, and people seem to like it, and a lot of people say, well, hey, how come you didn't tell me about this? And I want to write next time. So I'm sure the next time, because I'm be very surprised if there's not a next time. I'm sure the next time that we do this kind of PS Blog Week thing, there'll be more people involved, and we'll pick another topic and the tricky thing is trying to organize everyone and get everyone on the same page and make sure everyone knows what they're writing about, so there's no overlapping, and try to structure things in a kind of a learning path approach, and that's what we did. And maybe you learned even something.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So I will say I thought it was a great thing. So like Jeff said, they each they picked a topic, which was great because it was very cohesive, reading from week to week. And this one was on functions, which is something that I had coincidentally been working on also. But the first day was kind of the basic stuff, and then the next day from somebody else was here's how to add this, and then somebody else. It was really well done. I really liked it, and I was corresponding with Jeff a little bit, and I said, could have done a little better job kind of guiding people from one to the next, but other than that, I thought it was brilliant, and I'm a little disappointed that nobody else had thought of that beforehand, because it was just a great way to take a topic, and I'm sure Jeff's the same way, that we get topics and we want to blog about stuff, but blog posts take forever to write. So this is a great way to get a topic and break it up into bite-sized chunks and get it out there.
And we tried to. Every blog post should have had the links to the other articles in the series. So you should have, even if you found the first one, you would have found the next ones. Now, listen, when I posted mine, I had the links for the previous ones, but I didn't put in the links for the ones that were published after mine, although as each one was published, I went back in and updated it. So if you were to go back now to my blog post, you would see links to all of the articles.
Yeah, I think Francois was the only one that didn't have all of the posts. His was the first one.
Right,
so.
Because they hadn't been published yet.
Yeah.
So, so the first one, he didn't have any links really, and I wouldn't expect him to on that first day, because, well, something could happen, and so maybe, because we kind of already had things scheduled to post, so we kind of knew what everyone's links were going to be, but, things change, so I was just as happy to update my posts with the subsequent links as I knew that they were live and good.
Yep, it was great. So when I was talking to you before, when we were talking about this, I said that I really like this topic because as a SharePoint guy, I was thrust into PowerShell, and I won't bore everybody with telling the story again, but I went in kicking and screaming. I was not happy. So, and I don't think I've ever told you this story. The very first big speaking gig that I ever got was on SharePoint 2003's command line tool. It was called STS-ADM. So it was like, the crappy old command line tools that were.
Yeah, I know that tool. You love that tool.
Right. So the very first speaking gig at Tech Ed 10 years ago, STS-ADM. First book chapter I ever got published, STS-ADM. First magazine article I ever got published, STS-ADM. First tattoo, no, that's a different deal. But I was heavily, I was a big deal because of STS-ADM. And then went out to Redmond to find out about SharePoint 2010, and they're like, hey, we've got great news. It's all PowerShell. And I remember just wanting to pick up my chair and throw it at the guy because I had a lot invested in STS-ADM, and frankly, I'm not smart enough for PowerShell. So I went through, all the different stages of grief, the bargaining and all that kind of stuff, and came out of it a better man eventually, a couple of months later. But I think there's a lot of SharePoint administrators and SharePoint developers, they're in the same boat as I am, that PowerShell is kind of scary and kind of intimidating. And I think, we kind of get enough PowerShell to do the thing we want, and then we kind of stop. And that's where I thought that your guys' thing was great, and I kind of wanted you to talk about it, is kind of the next step for me is following good practices and writing functions. And, like Don Jones likes to say, don't be the tool user, be the tool maker. Mm-hmm. And that. So I guess talk about some of the tell the viewers what a function is, how we make it, get them excited about it.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of funny that you mentioned the STS admin, because I tell people the great thing about the SharePoint command list is you no longer have to use STS admin, which was an awful tool to try to do anything with, I thought.
Oh, I think awful's awfully harsh. So it was a little awful.
Anyway, so the whole point about PowerShell, and this, for a lot of people who are new to PowerShell, kind of puts them off. They think that they got to learn this arcane, Perl-like scripting language, and that's really not the case. So you're going to start by, and we can talk about SharePoint. I mean, I don't have the SharePoint commands handy. I'm not even sure I could name any off the top of my head. I've kind of dinked around with them a couple years ago. So you've got some SharePoint commandlets, and you load them up in your PowerShell session. You say, you know what, I want to run this SharePoint commandlet to do X. And so you can type that command. Let's say it's get library, or give me a SharePoint commandlet name.
So like get SP site?
Okay, get SP site. So I can do get SP site, and then with whatever parameters I want to modify the behavior of that commandlet. I can just type that interactively in the console, and I get the results that I want. Let's say then that I want, though, I'm going to do something repeatedly with that. I want to do get SPS site, and I want to use a certain set of parameters, and then I want to export that information to a CSV file, let's say, or XML. Let's do XML. That'd be better. So now, instead of having to type that long command, and it could be a one-line PowerShell command that would get all the SharePoint sites with whatever criteria you wanted, and then export it to an XML file, you could build a PowerShell function, which takes the command, you wrap it in a function keyword, the name of your function, and a set of curly braces, with a script block, and then you stick all your commands in there. That function then becomes like a little mini commandlet. So you could say, maybe you call it get my site. You then have that function. Now you can type get my site, instead of having to type all that long command, the get SP site, blah, 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 pipe to export, CLI, XML, or whatever you wanted to do. Now you have a command that you have built that meets your needs, that's your tool, and you just have to type get my site. If you want, you can even create an alias for that, GMS. So you can be really lazy. So
I openly mock people that use aliases, but since you're smarter than me, I'll let you go. I've been tripped up multiple times on aliases when I was...
Aliases are fine. This is nothing about PowerShell. PowerShell can be used in two ways. Well, actually, I'm going to tell you this story because I love this story. I use this when I teach PowerShell for people in training classes. I think something Snover talked about years ago. PowerShell, if you remember Saturday Night Live back in the 90s, they used to do this commercial parody for Shimmer. It was a delicious dessert topping and a fabulous floor wax.
Yep.
So PowerShell is like that. It's a delicious dessert topping and a fabulous floor wax. It is a really cool interactive shell, and it's also pretty powerful and easy to learn scripting language. So you can have the best of both worlds. Now, some people will do nothing but run interactive commands. They'll be the tool users. They'll run the commands, get service, get SPS site, or they'll run the scripts and modules and functions that you build. Or then you'll have people who will just be creating their scripts and functions and modules and graphical scripts sitting on top of PowerShell. So PowerShell gives you the best of both worlds. Now, for aliases, when you're working interactively in the console, the goal should be efficiency. You don't want to have to, because yes, there's a lot of typing, and people say, I can't type. Well, you don't have to do a lot of typing. First off, PowerShell has tab completion. I don't know how many times I have to drill when I'm teaching a class into students, don't type the full command name. Get -S, hit tab, and tab complete to get to the command that you want. So you don't even have to use aliases. But if you want to use an alias, if you know GSV, for example, is an alias for get service, and you know, hey, I just need to get a list of services, I'm typing it interactively, I can just bang out GSV, probably even faster than I can do get service and do tab completion. There's nothing wrong with that, because you know what GSV means, because you typed it.
Right.
Where this throws people off and where's the controversy or whatever it is if you write a script or a function and you put that GSV command in your function, it'll work because PowerShell will know what that is. But if someone were to look at that code that you wrote, new to PowerShell, they'll go, what is GSV? And it takes them some time to figure that out. Whereas if they saw in the script get-service, yeah, that's kind of meaningful. Now, one of the things that kind of cracks me up about the SharePoint command list is some of the names are just enormously long and complex, right?
Yes, yes.
So, but at least they're meaningful. I'll give them that. So if I were to see a SharePoint function or script and it used aliases for those command lists, I would be totally lost as to what it did, unless I took the time to go and unravel what those meant.
Right.
But if you gave me a script that you wrote that was built on SharePoint or the SharePoint command list, and you used the full commandlet names with the full parameter names, even if I knew nothing about SharePoint or the commandlets, I'd have a pretty good guess about what it is that your script was doing.
Yeah.
So using aliases interactively, go for it. The more you can do, the faster you can get it out, that's fine. But I don't want to see that, and the best practice is to not do that in anything that you publish, either for yourself, for someone else, or even if you post online, or in forums. You know, Twitter's kind of a special case because you're limited anyway, so yeah,
Right.
I'll grant you there are some aliases. But that's one of my pet peeves. People will post, you know, they'll write a blog post, and they'll post their script, and it's the most, they're using every single alias, and some of them are really cryptic. And it looks like, to me, it looks like Perl, because I found years ago I taught myself some Perl, which I've completely forgotten by now, and it felt incredibly cryptic. Probably wasn't, but it felt that way to me. And I think when people look at PowerShell, especially that uses a lot of aliases, or they'll start using the .NET framework, where they could just as easily use a commandlet. So instead of using the date time, instead of using getDate, they'll use the datetime class.
Yeah.
You're just showing off, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, the place that it threw me off, not so much, you know, the getSV and all that kind of stuff, but it was like using the %sign, you know, those ones, because you just got no chance. Like, is that part of the formatting, or is that part of the...
Yeah, there are some aliases. The question mark is for where object, and the % symbol is for each object. But yeah, if you were to see that in a script, it's incredibly cryptic. And my concern was that it just turns people off or think, I can't learn PowerShell. It's like programming. It's too hard.
Yeah, I'm still there after 5 years.
Service pipe. Yeah, there's a curly bracket. Okay, I can ignore that. $_status -EQ running. I don't know, kind of maybe something's status is real world status equals maybe running. You can kind of get a feel for what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. So Lori in the chat room brought up a couple of other things. Tab completion is also great to keep you from mistyping the name of the commandlet, because you can't misspell it if you tab completed.
That's exactly true.
And the other great thing, so, you know, NT Windows has had tab completion since the dawn of time.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that PowerShell brought that kind of upped the game is the tab complete on the parameter names. And I think that is just amazing, because I can not always remember the parameter that I want to use, but I can dash, tab, 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 tab. Love it.
And if you do it in the ISE, you get the IntelliSense pop-up.
Yeah.
Even better, did you know you get IntelliSense for parameter values?
I don't know. I did probably not.
So if you type so if you type get service,
mm-hmm.
let me make sure here that I'm not lying here. If you type get -service space and hit tab, it'll then cycle through all of these service names, because the first parameter for get service, which is positional,
right,
is the name of the service. And so PowerShell is smart enough to know that, oh, you must want the service. And so it will cycle through. That will also work for parameters that have validation sets. So if a parameter can take, you know, value X, Y, or Z, so, you know, my command dash parameter space and hit the tab,
or like
it will cycle through X, Y, and Z.
Great. So I had a question in the chat room from Jack. He was wondering if I use the ISE, and that is a question that I've changed my answer to recently. So I didn't used to use the ISE. When the ISE first came out, it was pretty bad, so I didn't use the ISE. And then I think with PowerShell 3 maybe, the ISE got really good.
Yeah, it
And
did.
so I started using it, but it didn't do one thing that I find completely imperative when I use PowerShell. The ISE did not support transcripts. And I use transcripts all the time. So there were some ISE plugins you could get, but I touch a lot of servers, so I never played with that. But with PowerShell 5, the ISE supports transcripting. So on the machines where I've got the PowerShell 5 preview installed, I use the ISE all the time. And I've started moving back to it because it is such a great tool. When I get on a 4 or a 3 box, I just have to use it.
Yeah. Now the thing about the PowerShell ISE, at least this is my take on it, because I use the ISE all the time, but I use it for building scripts and demos.
Yes.
I don't use it for my daily production interactive work with PowerShell, primarily because everything's in the same global scope. And unless I'm really careful, and most of the time I'm really not, you can run a script or a command that if it's not carefully designed, you can end up not getting the results that you expect in the ISE. So I use the ISE for testing and developing and building a script. Then when I want to actually run it or run any commands, then I just use the regular console. Now I'm okay if I use the ISE if I'm typing something that's not relying on variables or any sort of stored code or anything. If I do get event log system-newest 5, that will work fine in the ISE. But if I do get event log system $log, and I for some reason haven't paid attention to where $log is defined, that could be a problem.
Interesting. I hadn't
script. So
I hadn't run into that scoping problem yet. That's interesting.
And that's good. I'm glad you have. I just
as far as I know, I may have been deleting things for years and just not known it.
Yeah.
Who knows? But yeah, so for me, when when I'm doing PowerShell classes for SharePoint admins, the thing that I like about the transcript is normally for SharePoint folks, we're often doing something we haven't done before in PowerShell. We're trying to figure out, like talking about your SP site example, we're trying to figure out a way to do things. So there's a lot of noodling around and a lot of failing. And then at some point you get that piece that you're looking for. You get it all strung together just right. The PowerShell magic happens. Your screen glows. You kind of, you feel, you get up and do your victory lap. And then you don't use it again for a month and you forget how you did it. So I love having the transcript on for that. The other thing is a CYA measure. Just if something happens, they're like, hey, what'd you do on the server? Because I used to be a consultant, so I'd get on other people's servers all the time. Having that transcript is like, no. I mean, I realize it's a text document, but...
Well, but if you're running a transcript, are you doing that because you're running a script or running a series of interactive commands?
Usually the latter.
Then just do that in the console, because the ISE doesn't get you anything for that. So you might as well just do that in the console.
Yeah. Yep. But like I said, I'm
go ahead.
I was gonna say, I'm trying to come to Jesus and starting to write more functions. So I'm trying to work into the ISE because it's the way to do that.
Yeah, now the ISE though is not we'll say this, it's not a full-blown IDE. It's primarily the original intent, if you ask Nova, he'll tell you this, was to replace Notepad.
So I guess we should, this is one of the things that I hate when I listen to podcasts. We haven't defined what these mean. So would you want to tell them what ISE and IDE stand for? And what?
Yeah, so the ISE is the PowerShell Integrated Scripting Editor, I think is what it stands for. And IDE is a term for Integrated Development Environment. So like Sapiens PowerShell Studio is an IDE. And because it's full-featured, it's got all sorts of bells and whistles, make it easier for you to develop a script. The ISE, the PowerShell ISE, which ships on client operating systems, which is the only place you really need it. It's an optional feature for servers. No one should really have it installed on a server. But the ISE is designed for people who want to write, simple scripts, and simple can still be 1,000 lines, but at some point people in their PowerShell experience will kind of outgrow the ISE. you're going to start running into memory limitations. I had someone who was mentioning, I can't remember where I read it, he had like a several thousand line PowerShell script, and the IC just took forever to parse it. It said, well, yeah, you're too big. First of all, you need to modularize and probably turn some of your 3 or 5,000 line script into a set of functions and make it reusable, or you basically have outgrown the IC, and what you're trying to do is much more complex and advanced, and you have now need a bigger tool set.
Yeah.
You don't have Visual Studio, but you might need something like Sapiens Tool or any of the other PowerShell. Actually, there aren't a lot of PowerShell commercial editors out there. So,
Idera used to have one. I don't know if they still do.
Theirs is free now. I just did a review on it for Petri.com, which I don't know if it's been published yet or not. I can't recall if it has. But it hasn't been updated in a while. And I mean, it's not bad if you need something other than the ISE. I don't know what limitations. I didn't use it enough to see at what point will I break it. Even for the stuff I do, which is I do some pretty long, complex stuff, I have yet to personally to break the ISE, where I've needed more than what it can do.
Yeah, for those listening to the audio version, Sapien is S-A-P-I-E-N, and they are all PowerShell. So if you just go to sapien.com, you'll trip all over the PowerShell stuff. You can't miss it. Yeah, and I haven't used the Idera one for a few years either, so I'm not sure where it's at. Like I said, I don't normally use one, but then when the PowerShell, the one that came out of the box, got good enough, I just started using that. Yeah,
there's also, Quest and now Dell, they had Power GUI, which was another editor. I'm not even sure I don't know if you can still download it. That hasn't been updated in like forever. And then there is also the Visual Studio Community Edition, but again, that's a Visual Studio product. For IT pros who are writing PowerShell scripts and tools, I think that's kind of overkill for what you need.
I agree. I'm terrified of Visual Studio. It used to beat me up and steal my lunch money when I was a kid, and I've just never forgiven it for that. But I do have a horrible story about using Visual Studio. At the last SharePoint conference, I did a session on using Visual Studio to load test SharePoint. Seems safe enough, very IT pro-centric topic. And I was showing how it would generate code for different tests, so if there were developers, they could go in and check it. So I'm in this room, call it 300-400 people, big screen, all that kind of stuff, and I generate this, and some jackal in the front row, he's like, hey, could you scroll up and do that again? And I just created all this stuff. The very first line, one of the comments of this is, this script was generated by a tool. I've never forgiven Visual Studio for that.
Yeah.
And somebody in the chat room is also mentioning that Notepad++, which is a great free tool, also understands PowerShell. You can do the language selector for PowerShell.
Yeah, I mean, you just, as long as you're using something other than Notepad.
Yep. And you know that, so it's funny, so PowerShell's been out for a while now, and it's when I'm seeing it getting moved into things like Notepad++ and all that, it's a thing now. I mean, it's a real live thing.
Well, I would hope so. I mean, we're coming up on version 5. It's been out since 2006, so we're going on almost 10 years now.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Snover, who basically is the father of PowerShell, is now in charge of all of Windows Server. So do you think PowerShell has a future? Yeah.
Yep. One of the great things, I don't know if you've sat through this, Mark Manasseh's he does PowerShell sessions, and one of them I was in, and I'm sure he does this a lot. He's like, who here doesn't want to learn PowerShell? So a few people raise their hand. He's like, well, that's great, because when I go to McDonald's, I want to see some familiar faces, and it's going to be you folks with your hands up. It's the if you're going to do anything with Windows, it's all PowerShell now.
Yeah, for these people who have resisted for so long or think that it's an awful thing. Now, yes, there are some things in PowerShell that might throw you at first. I was talking with someone who was trying to run PowerShell on an i3 processor with a couple gig of RAM. Well, maybe if you're trying to do a lot, that might not perform as well. But remember, PowerShell is for IT pros. It's not for end users, really, still.
Right.
So and it's just something that we're going to have to adopt. And if you're not learning PowerShell now, you have to ask yourself, why am I not learning it? What is the roadblock? And I'm constantly asking people. Now, some of this is because people are still running XP in Windows 2003.
You're never going to get through to those people.
No choice at some point. And some people are just, they think, yeah, I don't need to learn it.
Yeah, it is wordier, but one thing I've figured out is it was so deliberately designed. Like anytime something in PowerShell annoys me, I just, I'll read through blog posts or whatever, and it was that way for a reason. I mean, Snover and the guys, and I give Snover 100% credit for all of PowerShell. There was so much thought and so much deliberation put into so many little bits and pieces of PowerShell. It's just, it's well thought out, and once you get in it, once you figure it out, it's good stuff.
Yeah, PowerShell has a couple things going for it. First off, really great help system. One of the first things you should do in a brand new, go into PowerShell, type update help, so you can get the updated help. And a lot of the stuff we've been talking about, I'm assuming people are running version 3 or later. If you're running PowerShell version 2, some of the stuff we've been talking about probably won't apply. But you type update help and then type get-help and learn how to use the help system. Great documentation. Now, I write a lot of PowerShell books, so I'm very happy when people go and buy PowerShell books. There's a lot of great information that's right there at your fingertips. You don't have to turn and find the book and look it up.
Yeah.
The second thing that the PowerShell team, to really make PowerShell easy to learn, is they were very consistent in naming conventions.
Yes.
So commands all follow a standard verb-noun naming convention, and it's a standard set of verbs. Yep. And they're plain English. They're get, set, remove. And then the noun is a singular version, whatever it is that you want to manage. SP site, service, ACL, file, AD user, mailbox. And then the last thing is they made PowerShell so that it's easy to discover. You can use the get member command. Type any object, type any command, like get SPS site. Pipe it to get member, and it will show you all of the properties of that particular object. Because we talk about PowerShell being this object-oriented, object-centered management engine, and that scares people. Think, oh, I got to learn, C++ or C# or be a programmer. No, you don't. But once you get your head around that I'm not parsing text, but I'm working with objects in a pipeline, you are just amazed. And a number of people would say, God, why didn't I learn this sooner? Once they get that epiphany of what PowerShell can do and how it works, now it's the people who struggle, or people who hate it the most, are those people who try to force PowerShell to be something that it's not. Because they're trying to force PowerShell to be into their preconception about what it should be, and then they complain, oh, this sucks, this is a crappy thing, Microsoft, why they force this on me? When most of the time, it's because they have not fully grasped that PowerShell paradigm. And once you get that paradigm, then the magic happens.
Yeah, I agree. It's been good. And so I think that the singular, the nouns being singular, was one of the things I loved with my good buddy, my old pal STS-ADM. There was a bunch of operators, which were like parameters, and I could never, is it enum web or enum webs, site or sites? I can never remember. There's no tab complete for the parameters. So the singular noun, brilliant, love that. So Mike Robbins just posted in the chat room, I've never tried this, get command, so you're talking about your discoverability.
Yeah.
Get command, pipe to get random. So it just takes any random command and spits it out, and then he's piping that through get help.
Yep.
What a great idea. That's just every day. It should be like a calendar PowerShell command line of the day thing.
I keep thinking about doing one of those.
So one of the things when Shane and I do presentations, when we give stuff away, we play heads or tails. So we flip a coin, whoever's got their head, whatever, and we weed people out, give away books or lap dances or whatever. And when I did the PowerShell session at the SharePoint conference a couple years ago, I used get random. So I did, heads, comma, tails, get random, and that's how we did it to pull it out. So yeah, it's good stuff. I mean, it's just good stuff. I get all excited about PowerShell.
That's how I spend my entire day, is either writing or trying something out. And right now I'm working on my sessions and demos for the PowerShell Summit next week and getting some new V5 stuff. And yeah, it's
excellent. So tell everybody about that. Tell about the PowerShell Summit. Probably not. Is it sold out? Is it too late to get involved in
yeah,
that?
it's too late. Yeah, it was too late a long time ago.
That's what happens when you're the most popular kid.
There might be some seats left in Europe in September. They'll be in beautiful Stockholm.
Oh, I love. So we have to find out their seats. I normally go to Stockholm in the fall, and the conference I speak at's canceled this year.
Yeah.
So
the PowerShell Summit is run by PowerShell.org, which is a community organization, and we do a North American conference, and then we also do a European conference, and it's 3 days of hardcore, nothing but PowerShell. If you don't get your PowerShell question answered during those 3 days, you either didn't ask it or, yeah, you didn't ask it. Because not only are 3 days of sessions led by PowerShell MVPs, leaders in the community, plus lots of people, number of people, especially for the North America, who are from the PowerShell team, including Jeffrey Snover, who does a couple presentations, and you'll get some of the main developers like Lee Holmes or Bruce Payette presenting. So you get to rub shoulders with the hotshots in the PowerShell world, and it's all very informal. They keep it really small, which is why there's no more seats available. And next week it'll be in Charlotte, and next year, I don't know, it may go back to Redmond, I don't know. And then Europe this fall in September will be in Stockholm. So if you go to PowerShell.org and go to up in the banner, there's an events tab, and or resource, and you can find more information about the PowerShell Summit, and if not, I can send you links also for your show notes.
Yep, I'll throw some in there. Yeah, so every year it's like a bad time. So next week I'm going to be in London at a conference, so I didn't submit anything. Last year when it was in Europe, I was in Europe, but I was speaking at the conference I speak at in Stockholm was the same days as the PowerShell Summit until the last day. So I actually flew through Amsterdam the day that you guys were having that conference down the street. Well, and I talked to Don. I'm like, man, I would love to just drive in and do something, but it was with airlines, you just can't rely on that.
Yeah, so I'll be presenting at the next week in Charlotte, and I'll also be presenting in Stockholm.
Excellent. What are you going to be presenting
on? Next week, I'm going to do something with delegation tooling with PowerShell, and then some stuff with logging, and talk about some of the new logging features in V5. And then I have no idea what I got signed up for Stockholm. That's too far. That's September.
got voluntold. So we're coming up on 40 minutes. We're running a little over, and it's getting close to your bedtime out there in New York. So I did want to have you talk to the SharePoint folks a little bit about DSC, what it is, and why they should care about it.
Sure. Yeah. So DSC, which stands for Desired State Configuration. This was introduced in PowerShell version 4. Will really take off, I think, when we get to PowerShell version 5. So with DSC, this is what we talk about as the make it so approach to system configuration. So if you're an IT pro and you're responsible for building a server, or let's say some SharePoint component to a server, you go through, you either manually build everything the way you want it to be, or you build some PowerShell scripts to go and configure things the way you want them to be, and then you deploy the server. And then over time, things change. Someone else comes in and says, oh, why is it this way? I'm going to change this. Or some other application or update comes in and changes some setting that you had configured. And then before you know it, your beautiful, pristine, beautifully configured server is no longer the way that you want it to be, and you have to go back and fix it. So with desired state configuration, instead of building a PowerShell script, let's say, to do the configuration, you tell PowerShell, you tell your server, I want you to look like this. Here is basically a instruction sheet. I want you to have this service with this start mode. I want to have this registry key. I want to have this local user account. I want to create these files and this directory. I want to create this website with these website settings. I don't care how you do it. I have no idea how to do that, but this is what I want you to look like. I then give that configuration to the server, and I say, make it so. And then PowerShell on the remote servers looks at that list of instructions as, oh, yep, I have some code installed locally. I know how to translate your configuration instructions. I can take care of it for you. And even better, you can configure that server to say, hey, you know what? Check, let's say, every 15 minutes. And if you no longer meet, if something has changed from what I told you to be, fix it. So now I can deploy a server and know that it will always be configured the way that I want it to be. And it doesn't matter whether it's 1, 10, or 100, or 1,000 servers. I've got one configuration per server, but I can use that same configuration for multiple servers. So with DSC, I can now leverage, because DSC is built on industry standards. It uses a MOF file, for example. Kind of ties in with things like Chef.
Okay.
So I can use my PowerShell skills on a PowerShell client, and I can create the configuration. I can use PowerShell language. I can use variables and syntax to construct a configuration dynamically if I want. I can then deploy that configuration. I can either push it to the server from my client desktop, or I can create what's called a pull server. And I can then take my configurations I built, say, on my desktop, get them on my web server or an SMB server, file share, and then configure my remote server, say, hey, look to this server, to this web server, and see if you have any new configuration instructions. And if you do, go ahead and apply them. I just did a series of courses on Pluralsight on DSC fundamentals, where kind of go through the basics of what DSC is, and then the advanced course goes through more complicated things such as working with certificates and setting up these pull servers, and it also walks through using DSC for a Windows server and walking through DSC to configure Linux. Did you hear that? Configure Linux.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the big thing about PowerShell is that the end game here is that from your desktop, you should be able to, or you will be able to, use PowerShell to manage everything in your environment, even if it's not running Windows. We can already do that now in V5 with some network switch commandlets.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be able to do that with Linux. And a lot of this is because Microsoft is moving more to this adoption of open standards, and DSC just is another piece of that.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So in the chat room, kind of people have been talking about it. For us SharePoint folks, unfortunately, SharePoint 2010 requires PowerShell v2.
Yeah, you're out of luck then.
And SharePoint 2013 requires v3. So there's some tricks that you can do to install newer versions and then force the older version of PowerShell to fire up when you fire up the SharePoint stuff, but that kind of scares me, honestly. So I don't think the SharePoint folks right now can take advantage of the DSC stuff.
And that may be true. A lot of the DSC stuff, there's only really a small subset of what are called DSC resources, which are basically the instructions, so the server knows I know how to configure a file, or configure a user. There are a lot of resources that are flagged as community, which means they were built by the community, or experimental. They probably will work, but experimental means if something breaks, you're on your own. So you have to testing, and yeah, we're still kind of at a point where we're gonna have to wait till we get more resources that are fully baked. And so, I mean, SharePoint's not the only one. I mean, there are resources from like Hyper-V and Active Directory, but they may or may not work in your environment. You have to test everything.
Yeah. So I think, so this year a whole bunch of new stuff's coming out. SharePoint 2016 is going to be coming out this year, so it obviously will support version 4 or 5 of PowerShell. So I think that's when we'll start seeing the DSC stuff for SharePoint rolling out, because I can see some advantages to that. In my head, I can think of some stuff.
Well, you can already do with DSC a lot of IIS stuff, so you can kind of get there. You can at least get partially the way there. And if you have the PowerShell skills, you can create your own resources. So it's just a fancy type of PowerShell scripting, special type of module setup that you have to do. But so if the Microsoft SharePoint team can't provide what you need, then you, Todd Klindt, can write a DSC resource.
Well, I think I appreciate your faith in my abilities, but that's one of the great things about this is there's so much opportunity to write cool stuff. Even an idiot like me, I can write functions that people can use. It can be helpful, and it's been a lot of fun. I don't like developers. I mock developers openly, but PowerShell I've been able to get some of those things that developers normally have to do. I'm able to do them with PowerShell and maintain my self-respect. So
yeah,
it's been good. So anything else? I'm going to let you go here in a few minutes. You've been very gracious. It's getting late there. Anything else you wanted to mention? Stuff you've been working on, things you've seen? The floor is yours.
No, the floor line. No, not really. Not too much. You've got the link. People have the link to my blog. I write a lot of PowerShell stuff for Petri.com, so people are looking to get more content. I do courses for Pluralsight, which I mentioned before. I will be at Ignite. People want to try to find me. Those are PowerShell happy hours, a Petri happy hour I'll be at. There's a Pluralsight party I'll be at, or you can try to find me on the showroom floor. Probably the best thing at Ignite.
Are you doing a shift at the PowerShell booth with Ed and the gang?
Oh, I'm nothing scheduled. I'll be hanging around. I'm sure Teresa will probably corral me at some point for a scheduled time. So
Teresa,
I'm fine with it.
For those of you that don't know, Teresa Wilson is Ed Wilson, the scripting guy, his wife, and she can be very persuasive. So that's great. So this was a good time. A lot of good questions in the chat room and all that. So I may end up having to bring you back at some point to hit some of these things.
Anytime.
Because my PowerShell or my SharePoint guys, we do a lot with PowerShell, and we've even got some PowerShell guys in here, Adam's in here, and Mike. So all good stuff. I think we'll have to bring you back.
Yep, anytime. So I'll see you in Ignite.
Yep, I will be there, and much like you, I'll be doing something at the PowerShell booth, but I'm not sure what. I got to talk to Teresa and find out.
Okay.
All that. But so everybody, wherever you're sitting right now, if you're in your car or whatever, clap a little bit for Jeff. I appreciate him coming in and joining us. So I'm going to sign Jeff off, and thanks again, Jeff.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
Bye.
So that was pretty cool. And I'm going to take one of these out so I can hear my own voice. That was pretty cool. So Jeff has been one of those guys that I've, always read his blog and bought his books and stuff like that. So being able to, I don't remember when it was, 2 or 3 tech heads ago, being able to sit down with him and just bounce ideas off of him and all that has been very exciting for me. So that was kind of cool. All right, so unfortunately, we've got the Jeff Hicks part of the show. We now have some non-Jeff Hicks related content to discuss. I know it's kind of a letdown, but there's some stuff that I've been meaning to talk about for the last couple of weeks, but got busy, stuff like that. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was the Microsoft band. I know that there's 3 or 4 of us out there that have these bands, and so it's this little beauty right here. It's a fitness band. It's got information. It can tell me how my stocks are doing or not doing. It can tell me what the UV ratings are right now. Very important. Guy like me, I tan well. Need to know about the UV. But when the band first came out, you needed a phone to get it all set up. You needed a Windows phone or an Android or iPhone. And here a couple of weeks ago, Microsoft released a Windows tool, so for your Windows boxes. So I use that. I've been having some tales of woe with my phone I'll talk about in a minute. But now I can hook my band up to my PC with the USB cable. I can charge it. And it will also sync in the background, so that's nice. It's not dependent on my phone. And you can do both, so you can sync with the band and sync with your phone. They don't write over top of each other, anything like that. It's all good. So if you've got a Windows 8 or 7 box, load that up. It's been great for keeping things synced up. Now, something I wanted to whine about a little bit. So you guys know I'm a big fan of Windows Phone. I've been rocking the 830 here for a while now, since Christmas time, a little after, something like that. And as you guys also know, I'm not very smart, and I put the betas on a lot of things. So I'm running the Windows 10 beta on a bunch of boxes here at home, and I've been signed up for the preview for developers for Windows Phone since it came out however long ago. Always gets me the most up-to-date bits on my phone. And a month or two ago, so the Windows Phone was sitting at 8.1. You could get the fast builds for that. But a month or two ago, Microsoft released a new program called the Windows Insider program that would let you get the Windows 10 build for your phone. Well, obviously 10 is better than Windows 8, so off I went. I installed the Windows Insider app on my phone. Yes, next, finish, and got Windows 10 on my phone. And hated it for the most part. It had a couple of things that I really like. When you brought the status window down, you could expand that. The settings screen was a little better. It was organized a little better. But for the most part, it was kind of clunky. Some things didn't work very well. It didn't like my band very well. But I kept thinking there are going to be some new builds, and I would tough it out. So waited for a couple of months, and Friday they dropped the next build of Windows 10 for the Windows Phone. Friday afternoon I installed it. Next, finished. Hated it even more. And so Friday night, a mere 2 or 3 hours later, I wiped my phone, put Windows Phone 8.1 back on it, and it's like a breath of fresh air. I have not loved this phone more in probably 3 or 4 months now that 8.1 is back on it. So I'm not trying to be one just to complain and not back it all up. Of course, this is a beta, so let's start out with that. So the problems that I'm having with Windows Phone 10, a bunch of people are having. It's not unique to me. But we're getting these turds on the internet that are all like, well, it's beta software. What do you expect? Well, nobody's saying we expected it to be perfect. And the whole idea of beta software is to run it and test things and to find the problems. I mean, this is the system working. So right now I've got this off of my daily driver, but I did put it on my Lumia 520 right here. So this one's running Windows Phone 10, unfortunately. Sorry, little buddy. I don't know what you did to deserve that, but it's running it. But here's the things that I didn't like about Windows Phone 10, the second refresh. For one thing, no Office. So they're moving Windows Phone over to these universal apps that are going to run on Windows Phone and Windows Desktop and all that. Office is going to be one of those. And this build removes Office. No Word, no Excel, no PowerPoint, any of that. But the most egregious of that, no OneNote. I can't use my phone without OneNote. I use everything in OneNote. I'm looking at OneNote right now for the notes for this podcast. I use OneNote for everything. So no OneNote. That was just unconscionable. The other thing is they've switched over to the universal app for Outlook, and it's got a bunch of good stuff in it. So things like, one of the things when you're in your inbox, you can swipe right to flag an email for a follow-up. You can swipe left to delete them. That's pretty handy. In 8.1, you got to hit the little box and delete and all that. And I've got my pointing finger. It gets tired as I'm going through my email, so that's swiping. That's good. But what they took away was the ability to pin individual mailboxes to the start screen. So right now on my phone, which is gloriously running 8.1, I've got a tile up here that is my home email, a tile down here that's my work email, and then I've got a folder here of other email. I'm checking 6 inboxes on this phone, and each one of them has its own tile on the start screen here. When you move to that Windows 10 Refresh 2 version of Outlook, you can only have one tile on your desktop for Outlook, and that's it. And it will show you the aggregate number of emails that you've got that are unread, and you have to go into Outlook and then go to each individual inbox to see how many is there. Completely unusable. For as many email inboxes as I have and as much fan mail as I get to all these different places, it was just unusable. So I did put it back to 8.1. Now, the Office thing, Microsoft has said they're going to fix that within coming weeks, they've said. They will release the universal apps for Office, so that will be fixed. As for Outlook, I don't know how that will handle, if that's just the way that it's going to be, or if they're going to put that back. I'm not sure. So that was pretty crazy. Now, for how to get it back was pretty simple. if you go out to, I think it's called either the Nokia phone tool. I don't know. I'll put links in the notes. But there's a tool that you can run on Windows that will wipe your phone and reset it back to whatever the release version is. So that's what I did Friday night. Another fun-filled, crazy Friday night here at the Klindt household, flashing our Windows phones back to the RTM build. So USB cable, took about an hour, and it wipes your phone. And you know, these days that's not nearly as big of a deal as it used to be because most of your settings and stuff are saved in the cloud in OneDrive or wherever. So it took a while, but then it had all of my my email stuff set up. I had to put a couple passwords in. All my apps started dumping in. Took them probably 4 or 5 hours before they all kind of cycled through, but I didn't have to worry about that. All my apps just showed up. So it wasn't a very traumatic experience. I didn't lose anything, didn't lose any settings. So for right now, you know, I've talked to people about the preview for developers and told people to get on it, and it's a lot of fun. For 8.1, that's still the case. The Windows Phone 10 preview, I would tread lightly. I would have lots of backups. I would, if you have, you know, sacrificial chicken bones or anything that you need to sprinkle, until that thing gets updated a little bit, I would hold off on that. So hopefully I've saved a few of you from going out and installing it. Now, Windows 10 for the phone is going to have a bunch of really great stuff once it kind of gets worked out. One of the things they're talking about in the chat room is it's got a new keyboard that is a one-thumbed keyboard for these phones like the 15, 20 that have really big screens. The whole keyboard's on one side so you can hold it with one hand and type. It has support for Bluetooth keyboards now, which is pretty great because you're going to have all these universal apps, so you can be able to do productivity stuff. The notification bar at the top has an expanded view, so you can put more buttons in there. And also the settings for the phone itself are organized a little better, and you can pin individual settings to your start menu if you want to. So there's a bunch of good stuff, but right now it's just not ready to go. One of the rougher betas that I've seen, and I've tested a lot of Microsoft betas, and this is one of the rougher ones. Okay, so we're on the home stretch here, folks. I know we've been going at this thing for an hour now. For Shameless Self-Promotion, so the first thing next week, like I've already said, you guys are stuck with Shane. I'm going to be gone to the SharePoint Evolution Conference in London, England, and that's going to be a blast. I actually have my slides done. I was working through my demos today, so that's going to be good. I'm going to be doing 2 sessions on upgrading SharePoint from 2010 to 2013. Lots of good information, lots of stories of stuff that I've screwed up, and some good demos too to kind of show you how stuff works. And then 2 weeks after that is a little thing in Chicago, a little intimate gathering that we're calling Microsoft Ignite. And you can go to ignite.microsoft.com and find out all about that. May 4th through the 8th. Those of you that want to be part of a select elite group can show up on May 3rd, the Sunday ahead of time, and come to Laura Rogers and I pre-conference session on OneDrive for Business. And Laura and I have been working on this pretty much nonstop for the last couple of weeks, learning so many cool things about OneDrive for Business and SharePoint 13 on-prem and hybrid stuff and Azure AD and all the great things you can do with that. This is, going to be a great session. It's going to be 7 hours, 9 to 5 with a lunch hour in the middle. May 3rd, you can go to ignite.microsoft.com and find out about that, sign up for that. And then during the week, I will be doing an upgrade session as well. Also, Rackspace is going to have a booth at Ignite. I'm going to be at the PowerShell booth. If you're one of the 20,000 people that shows up at Ignite, you come find me. Come find me, hit me up on Twitter, leave a message for me at the Rackspace booth. I would love to come up and shake your hand and just chat with you, see what you're doing, see why you're putting up with this podcast, maybe recommend you some better podcasts to listen to. But I'm very approachable, very friendly, so by all means, come find me. A new addition to the Shameless Self-Promotion is I will be talking to the Alaska SharePoint user group, and that is May 28th. And I'm not flying to Alaska, but I'm going to be doing it remotely. And so the good news about that is you don't even need to be in Alaska to enjoy this. You can go to www.akspug.org, akspug.org, and they've got a live stream there, and you can sign up for it. And I'm going to be talking about that on May 28th, and I'm going to be talking about hybrid SharePoint. So some of the things we talked about at Ignite, some of the cool things that are coming out, I'll be talking about that. And that's the Alaska SharePoint user group, May 28th. And then a couple months later, I'm going to be doing the same gig for the Mississippi PowerShell user group, and that is MSPS msps.ug.com. Spug and PS, I get very confused. msps.ug.com. That's going to be August 11th. That's going to be 8:30 at night Central Time. Haven't decided exactly what I'm going to talk about. There's a lot of things happening, a lot of things coming out between now and then, but I will be doing that, and again, you'll be able to sign up for that one. I will not be traveling to Mississippi, unfortunately, for that, which is funny because I've been to 38 states in the Union, got to get all 50 at some point. 2 that I have never been to are Alaska and Mississippi. I should just show up. I should just fly to Alaska, fly to Mississippi, and do that. And then the last one that I have to talk about is SharePoint-A-LoozA. That is down in Branson, Missouri. I have been to Missouri, so that one doesn't count. It's right next door. SharePoint-A-LoozA.org, and that is a big conference that Mark Rackley puts together. It's like one half SharePoint, one half party, but 100% just crazy good time. It's all good. So I'm going to be doing that. Don't know exactly what I'm going to be talking about there. That's a few months out. That is September 18th and 19th. But excited to be a part of that. I've not been a part of a SharePoint-A-LoozA yet. I've heard great stories. I've always felt left out, like I was a little kid looking out the window while all his friends were out playing. So I'm very excited to be a part of that one too. So that is it. That's all I've got lined up for now. So Teresa Wilson in the chat room says the scripting guide booth at Ignite will be in the section called MS on MS. It used to be called the Community Resource Zone. It will be near the Ineta booth and the Microsoft Learning Pass MVP, etc. So definitely swing by there. Meet all your favorite PowerShell celebrities. A guy named Jeff Hicks, he's going to be there. Ed Wilson, Don Jones, everybody. Mike Robbins will probably be there. Everybody who's anybody in the PowerShell community is going to be there, so swing by and see those guys. So apologize, we're up way over an hour. Looked like about an hour and 10 minutes, 6 minutes, something like that. Once I got Jeff on here, couldn't let him go. So much good stuff, so we'll have to bring him back. We've got some more stuff to talk about. But thanks to everybody. And again, next week it will be Shane here, but I'll see you again in 2 weeks. Thanks. Have a good night.